It was just after 2 in the morning when the fluorescent lights of the small-town police station flickered against the empty parking lot. The desk sergeant was halfway through a cold cup of coffee when the glass doors slid open and a man walked in. He wasn't running. He wasn't crying. He just stood there under that harsh white light, blinking slowly, his hands resting calmly at his sides. The sergeant looked up and asked the usual question, "Can I help you?" What came out of that man's mouth next made the sergeant set his coffee down, reach for his radio, and quietly press the panic button under his desk. Because what that man confessed to was not just a crime. It was something no one in that town even knew had happened yet. This is the story of Daniel Marsh, a 2-3-year-old from a quiet suburb of Dayton, Ohio, and the night he walked into the police station and told them something that would haunt an entire community forever. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand the days leading up to it. It was early August. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people left their garage doors open, where kids played basketball in the street until the streetlights flickered on. Nothing bad ever happened there. Not really. But for 2 days, something had felt off. A few houses down from Daniel, an elderly couple named Harold and Margaret, hadn't been seen. Their newspapers were piling up on the front porch. Their car was still in the driveway. Neighbors told each other they were probably just visiting their daughter up in Michigan. Maybe they'd forgotten to tell anyone. People make up these little stories to comfort themselves, because the alternative is too dark to think about. But Daniel Marsh wasn't telling himself those little stories. He knew exactly where Harold and Margaret were. He knew because he had been inside their house. He had walked right through their unlocked back door 2 nights earlier. Just as the sun was going down, he didn't know them. He'd never spoken to them. He just picked their house because it was there. Let that sink in for a second. Inside that quiet home, Daniel did something so brutal, so completely unthinkable, that when the details finally came out, veteran detectives had to step outside to collect themselves. He attacked Harold and Margaret in their own living room. Harold was 79 years old. Margaret was 76. They'd been married for over 50 years. They still held hands watching the evening news. And in the span of a few minutes, Daniel Marsh ended both of their lives with a level of violence that made no sense. There was no robbery. There was no argument. There was no motive at all. Just pure, senseless destruction. When he was done, Daniel didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked back to his own house, just a few doors down, and he went to sleep. For 2 full days, he went about his life. He ate meals. He scrolled through his phone. He watched the neighbors start to gather on the sidewalk, whispering, pointing at that uncollected newspaper. And something inside him shifted. Not guilt exactly. Not the way you or I might feel it. More like a strange kind of pressure building behind his eyes, until the only way to release it was to tell someone what he had done. And that is exactly what brought him through the sliding glass doors of the police station at 2 in the morning. The desk sergeant, a man named Officer Callahan, who had been on the job for 18 years, said later that Daniel didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. He looked like a college kid who'd stayed up too late studying. Officer Callahan asked him again, "What's going on tonight, son?" And Daniel leaned forward, placed his hands flat on the counter, and said 6 words that instantly changed everything. 6 words that I'm going to tell you right now, but first, you need to hear what the officers found when they finally went inside that house. Officer Callahan immediately signaled for backup. 2 patrol officers came into the lobby, and they asked Daniel to take a seat on the bench near the vending machine. He sat down without saying another word. Meanwhile, a squad car was already peeling out of the parking lot, heading toward the address Daniel had given them. The neighborhood was pitch black and silent. The officers approached the front door of Harold and Margaret's home and found it slightly ajar. Inside, the house was perfectly still. Nothing overturned. No sign of a struggle visible from the entryway. It looked like the couple might have just stepped out, maybe left in a hurry. But then the officers moved deeper into the house, toward the living room, and what they saw under the beam of their flashlights stopped them cold. I want you to imagine a scene so disturbing that the first officer on site immediately turned away and radioed for a supervisor, not because he didn't know what to do, but because he couldn't process what he was looking at. Harold and Margaret had been positioned. Their bodies weren't just left where they fell. Daniel had arranged them. He had placed objects around them. He had tried to make it look like something out of a horror movie, as if the killing itself wasn't enough. He needed to stage it. He needed to turn it into a display. That detail right there, the staging, told investigators they were not dealing with a typical crime of passion or a burglary gone wrong. They were dealing with something far more disturbing. They were dealing with a mind that wanted to create a scene so evil it would scar the first person who saw it. Back at the station, Daniel was still sitting calmly on that bench. When detectives arrived and sat down across from him in the interrogation room, they expected him to ask for a lawyer. They expected silence. Instead, Daniel looked them right in the eye and began to talk, and talk, and talk. He told them everything. How he chose the house, how he walked inside, how Harold looked up from his recliner, confused just before the first blow landed, how Margaret screamed, and how he stopped her screaming. He told them all of it in a flat, matter-of-fact voice, like he was reading a grocery list. The detective who conducted the interview had been working homicides for 15 years. He had sat across from murderers who wept, who lied, who blamed the victim, who blamed the devil himself. But he had never sat across from someone who described the torture and murder of two innocent people with absolutely no emotion whatsoever. Daniel even paused at one point, mid-confession, to ask if someone could get him a soda. This is where the case takes a turn that no one saw coming. Because once the confession was on tape, once the physical evidence from the house matched every detail he gave, you would think the story was over. But it was just beginning. Because Daniel's defense team came forward with a claim that would divide the entire town. They didn't deny that he did it. They couldn't. He had confessed in graphic detail. But they said Daniel wasn't evil. They said he was sick. They said that for years, Daniel had been hearing voices, suffering from severe untreated schizophrenia that twisted his perception of reality so completely that he genuinely believed Harold and Margaret were not real people, but some kind of threat he had to eliminate. The prosecution argued it was an act, a convenient excuse for pure sadistic cruelty. And so, the entire case came down to a single, haunting question. Did Daniel Marsh walk into that police station because he felt remorse? Or did he walk in because he wanted to see the look on their faces when he told them what he had done? That question would take months to answer, and the trial that followed revealed secrets about Daniel's past that even his own family didn't see coming. In Part 2, we are going to walk through the courtroom testimony that left the jury visibly shaken. We are going to hear the exact words Daniel said to the judge when given the chance to speak. And we are going to uncover the final twist, a piece of evidence found in Daniel's bedroom that changed the entire understanding of this case. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss Part 2. The darkest details of this story have not even been told yet. The courtroom was packed on the day they brought Daniel Marsh in. Every seat filled, reporters lining the back wall. Harold and Margaret's daughter sat in the front row, gripping her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't seen her parents' bodies. She had only been told they were gone. But in this courtroom, she was about to hear every detail, and she was going to hear it from the mouth of the young man who took them from her. Daniel walked in wearing a simple button-down shirt. No expression, no glances toward the family. He sat down next to his attorney and stared straight ahead at the judge like he was waiting for a bus. The prosecutor stood up and began to speak, and for the next 40 minutes, the courtroom listened to a level of brutality that is hard to even describe. The medical examiner took the stand and described over 70 separate wounds between the two victims. 70. Harold had tried to shield Margaret with his own body. You could see it in the defensive wounds on his arms. He died trying to protect his wife. In the back row, a court deputy who had worked security for over 20 years put his head down and walked out. He couldn't listen anymore. Then the defense took their turn. They called a psychiatrist who had spent over 60 hours evaluating Daniel. She testified that Daniel suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia with violent command hallucinations. She said that voices had been telling him for months that people in the neighborhood were not human, that they were imposters, that they were planning to harm him first. On the night he walked into Harold and Margaret's house, he genuinely believed he was defending himself against a threat that did not exist. The psychiatrist read from her notes. Daniel had told her the voices sounded like static at first, then like whispers, then like screaming. He told her he hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night for over a year. His brain was deteriorating, and no one noticed. Not his parents, not his friends, no one. That's when the prosecutor stood up for cross-examination and played a recording that changed everything. It was a phone call Daniel had made from jail just 3 days after his arrest. In the call, he was laughing, talking to a friend about a video game, describing what kind of food he wanted when he got out. The prosecutor stopped the tape, looked at the psychiatrist, and asked a single question. Does that sound like a man tormented by voices? Or does that sound like a man who enjoyed what he did and had no fear of consequences? The psychiatrist had no answer. The courtroom was silent, and Daniel Marsh just stared at the speaker on the wall like he was listening to a song he used to know. Then came the moment no one was prepared for. The judge asked Daniel if he had anything to say before sentencing. Daniel stood up. He turned and faced Harold and Margaret's daughter directly, and he spoke. His voice was low, steady, completely calm. He said he was sorry for the pain he caused. He said he thought about what he did every single day. He said he understood if they could never forgive him. But then he said something else, something that made the daughter physically recoil in her seat. He said he still didn't remember all of it. He said large parts of that night were just blank, like someone had erased them from his mind. He said the person who did those things didn't feel like him, and he hoped one day they could see that. The daughter stood up. The bailiff moved forward, but she didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just looked at Daniel Marsh and said 4 words through tears. 4 words that I cannot get out of my head, she said. You were their neighbor. You were their neighbor. And then she sat back down and buried her face in her hands. The judge sentenced Daniel Marsh to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they let him out in handcuffs, a reporter in the hallway shouted a question. Daniel, do you regret walking into that police station? He didn't answer. He just kept walking. And that's the thing that stays with me. Because we will never truly know why he walked in there that night. Was it guilt? Was it pride? Was it a mind so fractured that it needed someone else to piece together what it had done? The only person who knows is Daniel Marsh. And he isn't talking anymore. Some cases end with justice. Some end with understanding. And some just end with a question mark hanging over an entire community. A question that will never fully be answered. What makes a person capable of the unthinkable? And how do you ever feel safe again, knowing that the most ordinary face on your street might be hiding the darkest secret imaginable? If this story stayed with you, if you found yourself thinking about Harold and Margaret and the life they should have had, please take a moment to like this video. It really does help more people hear these stories, and these stories deserve to be heard. And subscribe if you want to be notified for the next deep dive. Because there are more cases just like this one. Cases that make you lock your doors at night. Cases that make you look at your own neighbors a little differently. I will be covering them here. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay safe.